Good morning, everyone. Pam Jacobson here, your host of 3 Things You Need to Know, helping you to get well and stay well in these crazy, crazy times that are going on for all of us. For those of you who don't know me, I have a very long career in healthcare, spanning everything from conventional medicine. I was an oncology nurse in the early part of my career. I have my master's degree and license in Chinese medicine, and I'm currently focused in the area of functional medicine, which is helping you to get and stay well, restoring healthy function, helping people deal with their health conditions, diseases, and so forth. I work with clients all over the country. I put here on the chat my email address, the website address. You can comment here. Pretty easy to find me if you're wanting to get some help. So the 3 things we're going to talk about today, I'm going to try to speed up the process because my analytics say that I only have your attention for about 10 minutes. So I'll try to get all the information in as quickly as I can. We're going to talk about vitamin A and why it's important. We're going to kind of explore whether or not you're stress resilient, which is critical. And we're going to talk really briefly about caffeine and maybe some of the risks and benefits of that. So I'm still in the mode of immune system protection, immune system support, because we are by no means out of the woods when it comes to this pandemic, this COVID situation. In fact, it is growing in most areas now that we've opened the country and we're kind of moving back into our daily lives. We're seeing the numbers go up. And really, honestly, for all of us, you have essentially 2 things that you're in control of as far as your protection from that, and that is to limit your exposure. So again, I think be careful, and you can look at my videos from a couple of weeks ago I talk in depth about that. And to really support your immune health. And so that's a lot of what the information is that I'm giving all of you on a daily basis is about supporting immune health. And vitamin A is a way to do that. So it's not extremely common necessarily that we would have vitamin A deficiencies, but it is something that I do see relatively regularly in my practice. Some of the reasons why a person might be deficient in vitamin A is they have poor gut function. So if you're somebody who has a lot of reflux, bloating, gas, you have a digestive disease, IBS, or something along that line, you're likely to be vitamin A deficient. If you're anemic, vitamin A and iron kind of go together. So if you're anemic, you likely are also deficient in vitamin A. And in fact, if you're taking iron, you should be taking vitamin A. The 2 kind of work together. If you have any kind of a health condition, oftentimes we'll see issues around vitamin A, things like autoimmune diseases. We'll commonly see vitamin A. And then if you've got a really crappy diet, vitamin A is readily available in in our diet, but it has to be a pretty healthy diet to get the right types of vitamin A. So check yourself on that. If you've got eye problems, skin problems, chances are you've got some vitamin A deficiency. So what is vitamin A? It is a fat soluble vitamin. And what that means is your body stores it. And you may have heard of that before. I think there's, people are afraid of the toxicity of vitamin A. Well, it's fat soluble, so your body does store it. And there's really kind of 2 main forms of vitamin A. There's the active form. So when you consume it, it's active immediately in the body. And that comes from animal sources. So again, from the diet, things like meats and fish and chicken and dairy products have ample amounts of active vitamin A. And then you have the carotenoids or carotene plant-based vitamin A, which is not active. In other words, when you consume vitamin A from plant sources, your body has to convert that into the usable form of vitamin A. But the advantage to that type of vitamin A is that it does not build up in your body. Your body uses what it needs and then it gets rid of the rest. So you do not see toxicity with plant sources of vitamin A. And in animal sources, if you're getting ample amounts of that in your diet, there's no reason to supplement with additional active vitamin A. So 2 types of vitamin A, or 2 kind of thought processes. There's actually, multiple different carotenoids and types of vitamin A. So what does vitamin A do? Well, one of its most important jobs is it assists your immune system in the development and function of your white blood cells and your killer cells and your T and B lymphocytes, the things that are part of how your immune system protects you. It also is important for the maintenance of your mucous membranes, right? In your sinuses, your nose, your mouth, and your gut, and your whole digestive lining. These are your first responders, or your barriers, if you will, to the entry of things like viruses and bacteria in the body. So really important to maintain healthy mucous membranes, and that is a vitamin A responsibility. And it has lots of other really important functions: eye health, skin health. It can decrease the risks of some cancers. It helps with genetic transcription. I mean, just super important nutrient. So how do we know whether or not we have deficient vitamin A? Well, I've mentioned some things that you can be looking out for. We can also, we have the ability to do micronutrient testing, so we can look and see if your vitamin A is sufficient. And how much should you be taking? Mixed carotenoids, again, coming from the plant-based, somewhere between 5 and 10,000 units of vitamin A daily is safe for most of us. If you are pregnant or you are a smoker, you should stay below the 8,000 international units per day. For smokers, the reason for that is because in some studies it has indicated that the supplementation of vitamin A fuels some cancers, lung cancer specific to smokers. So, but otherwise, vitamin A is generally, especially coming from plant sources, is not toxic and generally considered safe. Some things that make vitamin A more available to you in the body: vitamin C. So oftentimes in your supplements, you'll see vitamin C will be in there to help with that absorption. Interestingly enough, oral contraceptives also increase the availability of vitamin A. So if you're supplementing and you're taking birth control pills, you'll want to be careful there about your dosing. But by and large, vitamin A in that dosage range is very safe. And I have to say, this is not the time to take our foot off the gas when it comes to your immune health and your immune support. So if you suspect that you have some vitamin A deficiency, it's a supplement that's readily available for you. I can help you access it. There's a really great liquid vitamin A product that I love, where you just really need 1 drop a day. So it's super simple, especially if you're already taking a lot of capsule and pill supplements, and this just makes it easy. So reach out if you need something like that. Leaders, I have gotten a question: do I recommend a vitamin A supplement as a foundation, just vitamin A, or formula with other ingredients? How much should we aim to take per day if we want to boost immunity? I would say that vitamin A in a supplement form, along with other nutrients like vitamin C. So you'll see generally vitamin A will be in a good multi-nutrient formula. I use Mitocore from Orthomolecular. I love that product. And when I compound, I oftentimes will custom compound formulas for my patients. I'll put vitamin A along with the other things that they're using. And again, somewhere between that 5 and 10,000 unit range. You can temporarily go higher than that if you're looking to boost immunity for a period of time. But I think as a maintenance dose, between the 5 and 10,000 units a day is a good maintenance. I will use vitamin A separately in my anemic patients, in my clients who have need help with gut repair. So that's a time when I will just use a separate vitamin A supplement. So I hope that answered your question. So anyway, everything you need to know there about vitamin A. Reach out if I can help you with giving you testing or helping you get access to good supplementation. So topic number 2, and I feel like today this is one of the most important things that we could be talking about, and that is to really kind of explore whether or not you are stress resilient. Are you set up to manage your response to the stress? And I thought it was, one of the things that was really interesting in my thinking about in my preparation for this talk today is when you look at the 4 kind of key stressor areas. Mental emotional is one of those key stressors. And it's the one when I ask my patients, what's your stress level like? It's really the mental emotional stress in their life that they're generally sort of thinking about when I bring that up. And what's interesting about mental emotional stress is it's not really the actual stressor. It is my perception or your perception of that stress. And there's kind of four areas that kind of govern that, whether or not it's new to you, so you have no prior experience with that, whether or not it was predictable or unpredictable. Was this something that was new, that was not predicted, that poses some kind of a threat to you, either your personal safety or even your structures, your routines, or perhaps even your ego or your perception of your status or place in the world. And then the perception of a loss of control. And if you think about those four areas, everything that's happening today for every single human on the planet hits all of these areas. So that just blows my mind. I'm not sure that there's probably ever been a time in history where we as a planet, as a species, are being presented with the levels of mental, emotional stress that we're having, right? Everything that's happening right now is new for most of us, is unpredictable for sure, is a threat to us, our physical safety, our health safety, our position in the world, everything from our finances to our structures, you name it, right? Nothing is the way it was. And most of us feel completely out of control, as if we have no ability to control that. So that's one of four stressors. Sleep disturbance, sleep cycle disturbance. I think if there's ever been a time in most of our lives where we've had sleep issues, it has, now is the time, right? Those of us that never had it now have it. Those that already had issues, it's worse. And that's because of this sort of vicious cycle that we see with stress and how it impacts sleep. But sleep is really the only time that we get to reset our the mechanisms involved in stress, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. Blood sugar imbalance, right? Again, another vicious cycle. When we're in stress mode, fight or flight, the body uses more glucose, and we can create blood sugar imbalances through poor diet and high levels of stress and not having enough sleep and so forth. So blood sugar imbalance, and then inflammatory imbalances, which are, I talked about inflammation last week, your brain on fire. Inflammation in our bodies is a key stressor, along with some other things like overexercising, drug and alcohol abuse, electromagnetic frequencies, temperature extremes, large amounts of noise. These are all things that are perceived by or recognized by the body as stressors. So I think it's important to have just a quick anatomy lesson on how stress works in the body. There's when I'm talking about stress today, I'm talking about three main structures. The hypothalamus, which is located in the back of the brain, the hindbrain, and it's a piece of your primitive, you've heard me talk about the primitive brain or your survival brain. The hypothalamus is an important player in that area of the brain, and is one of its key functions is our survival and the processing of our mental, emotional inputs. So when we have a mental, emotional stress or a perception of stress, the hypothalamus goes into action by releasing hormones that cause our adrenal glands, which produce our stress hormones, to release a hormone called cortisol. So I'm going to talk mostly about cortisol, but this hypothalamic pituitary, which is a small gland in the brain, but considered the master gland, and is kind of in charge of all of our glands that produce hormones in our body. And then the adrenal gland is what I'm talking about specifically today when we're talking about stress resilience, and the interplay between these three structures. So essentially, we get a perception of a stress. Let's just, the last couple of days, it's been riots and are just, most of us are flabbergasted by the craziness that's been going on, and many of us in fear for our own personal safety. That hits the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus sends a message to it produces a releasing hormone that sends a message through the pituitary that hits the adrenal glands to make cortisol. That's one of many stress hormones, but cortisol is what we're going to talk about today. And what's the role of cortisol? Well, again, top of mind for me is immune health. So I'm talking about stress resilience today and how it impacts our immune health. Cortisol is the primary hormone that governs immune function. So just think about that for a minute. If cortisol is also a primary hormone that's activated when we are in fight or flight, when we're afraid, when we are stressed. It's also the primary hormone that's involved in our immune protection. So you can see how large amounts of stress, unmitigated, unmanaged, can have a profound impact on the ability for us to have good or well-controlled, well-supported immune health. So there's lots of other effects of cortisol. It helps manage glucose. It's a very important aspect of our sleeping waking cycle, our circadian rhythm. So it is, cortisol is the hormone that would be highest in the morning. We kind of think of it as the wake up hormone. So it wakes us up in the morning and then gradually declines throughout the day to be at its lowest level at night. So it forms part of our circadian rhythm, our sleeping waking cycle. Melatonin is the other hormone that is low in the morning and rises at nighttime, and that's the interplay between the two of those. So again, talking about cortisol. So how does one know if they're stress resilient? How do I know how stress is impacting me? Well, I think, certainly there are physical symptoms that you're going to recognize: fatigue, poor sleep, problems with blood sugar control, being hypoglycemic, or even those of you who are diagnosed as diabetic or maybe pre-diabetic. This whole stress response situation going on in the body can have a big impact on that. Your stamina, your physical ability, your sexual ability, all of those things are very much dependent on the interplay of these various hormones, particularly cortisol. We are able to test. So there's a very simple salivary test. It's you spit in these little tubes. It takes really basically a day to complete the test. It's not an expensive test, but it can give us a wealth of information about how you are managing your response to the stressors. Because the reality is we don't have control over these stressors in our lives, but we do have the ability to manage how we and mitigate how we are responding. The basic instinct of the human is survival, and the primitive brain is responsible for that mechanism. So you will always, or the brain or nervous system will always favor survival over everything else. And so if we're not doing everything we can to manage how the brain interprets our thoughts, our feelings, and the input, we are constantly going to be fighting between our nervous system thinking that we're dying and the need of hormones for other functions in the body. So really important to put into place things that can help to manage that so that you're not constantly in this stress response side and not enough in the relaxation and repair side, where this is really kind of where our normal body function can happen. So we can test, and in that test, it helps us to be able to see where things have gone wrong, and guides me, a practitioner, on how I can help you to restore more normalized function. The test looks at your overall level of cortisol. It looks at the rhythm. So is it high in the morning, low at night? It looks at something called the cortisol awakening response, where we would expect to see cortisol rise sharply about 30 minutes to an hour after waking. And so those are all important indicators that what you're doing on a daily basis is helping you properly manage that stress response. So really great test. If you've not had it done, I think it's worthwhile to have it done. If you've had it done, but it's been a year or two, especially given our current situation, probably not a bad idea to consider doing it. So what do we do then to help ourselves become stress resilient? So for those of you that already have a really good, solid daily self-care routine that includes some form of stress response management, such as meditation, biofeedback, yoga, then you're perhaps much more stress resilient than those of us who don't have that in place. So when I'm working with a client, there's two ways that I work kind of concurrently to help someone become more stress resilient. There's the things that you need to do on the lifestyle side, and that would be proper sleep hygiene, and doing everything we can to support sleep. And I've talked about sleep in the last few weeks, so refer back to that for specifics about sleep hygiene and supplements that you can use to deepen sleep. Moving your body on a daily basis is really, really important to stress resilience, but not over-exercising. Remember, that's a stressor. And a stress response management routine every day, right? Meditation in the morning, closing out your day with meditation, using biofeedback. I love the Inner Balance program from HeartMath, which is a great program that can help you with building up your stress resilience. Just simple exercises throughout the day, setting a timer to remind yourself to take deep breaths. The deep breath is the only indicator to the nervous system that you're not in danger, actually. So it's a great tool to use to begin to retrain that nervous system that you're actually not in mortal danger. So the things that you do every day, really, really critical. Diet is critical to building good stress resilience. And then we treat, based on what we find in the testing, that to recreate that good circadian rhythm, to recreate that normal cortisol balance, we use products that have adaptogens, things like ashwagandha, holy basil, rhodiola, are some of the things that we use to help balance. They're called adaptogen herbs, and they can help balance that adrenal hormone production as far as stress hormones versus those hormones that we need for our normal daily healthy function. So if I can help you understand whether or not you're stress resilient, test, provide you with the right nutrients, but all of you can help yourself in a big way by just having a great daily self-care routine. And I've done a number of videos about each component of that: sleep, exercise, diet, stress response management every day. So I hope that you found that helpful. Item number 3, this will be quick. We're going to talk about caffeine. So yay or nay, is it beneficial? Is it risky? It depends on who you are. It can be a little bit of both for all of us. So caffeine is, when I'm talking about caffeine, I'm thinking mainly about the caffeine that would be contained in something like coffee or tea or green tea, not, caffeine in any other type of beverage. Most of those beverages like Coke and sodas and things like that are so unhealthy for you that I would say that that's never going to be a good way to get your caffeine. But when it comes to things like coffee and tea, there's a lot of great benefits, right? There is not only caffeine, which is in plants, caffeine is actually a pesticide, right? It kills the pests that are trying to eat the coffee plant. But in humans, it's a stimulant for the central nervous system, right? So it's one of those things. I just talked about the nervous system and stress. Caffeine, for some of us, can actually increase the stress to our fight or flight response. So some of us have to be very careful about caffeine. There's a particular genetic predisposition. I happen to have this predisposition where I'm a slow metabolizer. And you'll know if you're a slow metabolizer if you're somebody who drinks a cup of coffee and feels very jittery afterwards for a long period of time, or the person who says, I can't drink any coffee after noon because it'll keep me up like 9 hours later, I won't be able to go to sleep. Or someone who's easily affected by alcohol, feels pretty loopy after 1 or 2 drinks, or takes a sleeping medication or a pain medication and gets double the effect that a normal person would, that you're probably likely to be what we call slow metabolizer. So in those instances, caffeine overconsumed is really going to overstimulate your nervous system. So some of us have to be very careful, and I'm one of those people, careful about my caffeine consumption. However, I do consume some caffeine. I do a half-caff coffee every morning. And the reason I do that is because there are some really great compounds in coffee, right? There's micronutrients, but there's high amounts of antioxidants, which are great for inflammation and immune function and all kinds of other important functions in the body. And coffee actually has more antioxidants even than green tea, which is something most of us tend to think is very healthy. So I think there are some great benefits to caffeine in the form of coffee, tea, particularly around antioxidants. But coffee can also do things like protect the liver and increase your physical performance and boost fat burning. So one of the great benefits of caffeine is, especially in a weight loss situation, If you're somebody who can tolerate caffeine, it can be really great at assisting with fat burning. Some of the risks of caffeine, it can be addictive, right? And many of you who use caffeine on a daily basis that then had to stop it for some reason will recognize that withdrawal in the form of usually a pretty nasty headache. It can cause digestive issues, right? It's highly acidic, and often coffee is anyway. Often those of us who have digestive problems will not be able to tolerate that. It can enhance mood issues, particularly anxiety. I talked about that earlier because of its effect on the central nervous system. It can be a caloric problem for some of us because most of us, or many of us, don't drink our coffee black. So I think you do have to be careful. Coffee in and of itself is no calories, but most of us add things to it, sugar, cream, and so forth. So you'll want to be careful there. Use something like stevia, your alternative milks like oat milk or hemp milk or, coconut or almond milk as your creamer. To make it so that you're not, it shouldn't be some sweetened frappe type of a drink that you get your caffeine from. Again, we're not looking to mess with our blood sugar or cause an issue with weight. And coffee is one of those. Coffee and tea both are one of those areas that can do that if we add a bunch of stuff to it. So caffeine. It can be a really great thing for most of us. It can help with fat burning. Coffee and tea have lots of great antioxidant compounds contained in them. So in my book, and when my patients ask, can I have coffee? Is caffeine okay? First of all, it's individual. So you kind of have to test to see how you react and then moderate your consumption. A cup of coffee has about 95 milligrams of caffeine in it. Unless you're doing a super high charged coffee, like something at Starbucks has, I think it's considered to be almost double that. So I do find with about a half calf, so maybe about 50 milligrams in the morning. But you can tell, you feel jittery, you feel wired up, your hands are a little bit shaky. So just sort of watch for those kinds of reactions and titrate accordingly. And then also choose a good source. Coffee it's a crop food. It can be highly pesticide laden and so forth. So make sure you're choosing a good, clean, organic brand of coffee or tea or whatever your caffeine choice is. So there you have it, guys. 3 things that you need to know. I did have another question about testing. If I haven't been tested and maybe can't get that, but I feel exhausted and burnout, could I still take the supplements? Absolutely, right? Using adaptogens mean exactly that they adapt to, in other words, they increase where increases are needed, decrease where decreases are needed. The whole idea of adaptogens is to balance, right? To adapt, to help you adapt to the normal condition. So you can feel free to use any of those types of adaptogens. And usually you'll find those formulas in a mixture. Like, again, I tend to use orthomolecular products. They have an adaptogen formula called New Adapt that has the ashwagandha and the holy basil. It's a lovely formula. I use it with a lot of my patients. I use it myself to regulate that circadian rhythm, that cortisol balance. So it's a very safe product to use. And you'll find, adrenal, when you're looking for adrenal support, generally that's what you're going to find is that it's going to be an adaptogen type of formula. Another question, caffeine-wise, do I recommend resetting? If so, how often? How could you rotate off caffeine and back on? I do think it's because it can be highly addictive. I do think that, like with everything in our routines, in our bodies, we need to always be striving for a level of balance. And in the diet and in consumption of things like caffeine, you want to have rotation, right? We don't want to be doing the same thing all of the time. So I would recommend mixing it up, right? Rotating on and off of. One of the ways that you can titrate yourself with caffeine is to start by just slowly decreasing the level of caffeine. If you drink a full strength, you can go to then a half calf and then a quarter calf, and then switch to an herbal tea, and you can do that over a week period. And I think it's a good idea not to always stay at 3 or 4 or 5 cups of coffee a day, but to really understand how addicted you are and how impacted your body is by titrating down and switching off to an herbal type of product without caffeine. And then you can kind of cycle in and out of that. So I think that that's what you meant by resetting. It also makes it so that it's not so difficult for you should you find yourself in a situation where you're going to be off of, caffeine for a period of time for some reason. So I hope that helps. I hope that you found all of this information useful. I'd really focus your efforts on being stress resilient. This is a time, such a trying time in our history, and certainly not a time to take your foot off the gas when it comes to protecting yourself from an immune perspective. And your response to stress has a major impact on that on a daily basis. So look back at a lot of my previous videos. I'm always focusing on stress response and immune health. And if you have questions, please reach out to me. Please respond to the videos here. Let me know if there's other topics you want to know more about. And join me here every Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. or catch my Facebook. I'll repost the video on both Facebook and through my constant contact to my database. So take care, everyone. Have a great Wednesday. I'll see you next week.